The red dust swirled like angry spirits across the plains as Eliza stepped off the stagecoach at Mercy's Bend, her widow's weeds already coated in the fine grit that seemed to permeate everything in this forsaken corner of the West. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, and she raised a gloved hand to shield her eyes, squinting at the ramshackle collection of buildings that comprised the town. She had nothing but the carpetbag in her hand and the clothes on her back. Everything else had been left behind in a past she couldn't bear to think about. The driver threw down her small trunk from the roof, and it landed with a thud that sent up another cloud of dust. He didn't wait for a thank you, just clicked his tongue at the horses and rattled away, leaving her standing alone on the main street. Mercy's Bend wasn't much to look at. A general store, a smithy, a church with a crooked steeple, and a saloon that seemed to be doing the most business despite the early hour. Eliza straightened her shoulders and made her way toward the saloon. She needed work, and in her experience, saloon keepers always knew who was hiring. The silver dollar was dim inside, reeking of tobacco smoke and spilled whiskey. Conversation died as she entered, every head turning to stare at the young widow in their midst. Eliza kept her chin up as she approached the bar where a heavy-set man with impressive mutton chops was wiping glasses with a stained cloth. "I'm looking for work," she said simply, her voice steady despite the weight of all those eyes upon her. The barkeeper, his apron identified him as Murphy, looked her up and down with an expression somewhere between pity and suspicion. "Can't help you, missus. Don't need no more help here. And even if I did," he gestured vaguely at her mourning dress, "this ain't no place for a respectable widow. I can cook, clean, mend. Try the church." Murphy cut her off, not unkindly. Reverend's wife might know of something proper for a lady. But the Reverend's wife, a pinch-faced woman who peered at Eliza through the cracked door of the parsonage, had no help to offer either. "Where's your people, child?" she asked, her voice sharp with suspicion. "A young woman traveling alone. It ain't natural." "I have no people," Eliza replied quietly. It was true enough. The woman's face softened marginally. "Well, I suppose there is Jesse Calder, lives out on the edge of town, about 3 miles northwest. Lost his wife some years back. Keeps to himself mostly. Heard tell he's been looking for someone to help with the house, though Lord knows he's run off everyone who's tried." She leaned closer, dropping her voice. "Strange man, that one, but he pays fair, or so I'm told." Eliza thanked her and set off, following the dusty track that wound away from town into the endless grassland. The sun was beginning its descent toward the horizon by the time she spotted the ranch, a modest spread with a 2-story frame house, a barn, and various outbuildings scattered about. Smoke rose from the chimney despite the heat, and she could see a few head of cattle grazing in the distance. She paused at the gate, suddenly uncertain. What was she doing? Approaching a strange man's home, alone. But the weight of the empty purse in her pocket decided her. She pushed through the gate and walked up to the house, her boots clicking on the hard-packed earth. The man who answered her knock was nothing like what she'd expected. Jesse Calder was perhaps 35, tall and lean with the build of someone who worked hard for a living. His face was weathered by sun and wind, making him look older, and his dark hair was overlong, as if he couldn't be bothered with regular barbering. But it was his eyes that caught her, gray as winter storm clouds and just as cold. "What do you want?" His voice was rough, as if he didn't use it much. "Mr. Calder, I'm Eliza." She hesitated, then simply said, "Eliza Hayworth. I heard you might be looking for help." Those gray eyes narrowed, taking in her appearance from her dusty boots to her black bonnet. "You're that widow who got off the stage today." News traveled fast in small towns. She nodded. "I don't need another cook who'll burn everything and run off crying after a week," he said bluntly. "I won't burn anything, and I don't cry easily." Eliza replied, meeting his gaze steadily. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, at her directness. He stood there for a long moment, clearly wrestling with himself, then stepped aside. "Come in, then," We'll see. The house was exactly what she'd expected from a man living alone. Functional but neglected. A layer of dust covered most surfaces, and the windows were grimy. The furniture was good quality but worn, and there were gaps on the walls where pictures had once hung. The whole place had an air of abandonment, as if its owner was merely existing within its walls rather than living. Jessie led her to the kitchen, which was in better shape than the rest of the house. "Can you really cook?" Instead of answering, Eliza removed her bonnet and rolled up her sleeves. "What do you have in the larder?" An hour later, she set a plate before him, beef and beans seasoned properly, biscuits that were light instead of hard as rocks, and coffee that didn't taste like it had been boiled since morning. Jessie ate in silence, but she noticed he cleaned his plate, $1 a week plus board. He said finally, "You'll sleep in the room off the kitchen, no going into the upstairs rooms, and I don't want any female chattering. I hire you to work, not talk." "Understood." He pushed back from the table. "You can start tomorrow. There's bedding in the chest in your room." He grabbed his hat from a peg by the door. "I'll be in the barn." And with that, he was gone, leaving Eliza alone in the kitchen. She looked around at the work that needed doing, dishes piled in the dry sink, floors that hadn't seen a proper scrubbing in months, windows so dirty they barely let in light. Then she walked to the small room he'd indicated. It was tiny but clean, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small window looking out toward the endless prairie. She sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing herself a moment of weakness. The exhaustion of the past weeks, the running, the fear, the grief, threatened to overwhelm her. But she'd meant what she said about not crying easily. She'd shed all her tears already, left them behind with everything else she'd lost. That first night, she barely slept. The house creaked and settled around her, unfamiliar and strange. Sometime near midnight, she heard the haunting sound of a harmonica drifting from somewhere outside, a melody both mournful and beautiful. She lay in the narrow bed, listening to that lonely music, and wondered what kind of man she'd bound herself to. The next days fell into a pattern. She rose before dawn to start the coffee and breakfast. Jessie would appear, eat in silence, and disappear to tend his cattle and horses. She spent her days bringing order to the chaos, scrubbing, washing, mending, cooking. He had little in the way of provisions, so she made a list of necessities. "I'll need to go to town for supplies," she told him on the fourth morning. He looked up from his plate, those gray eyes unreadable. "There's credit at Morrison's. Don't gossip with the townswomen," as if she had any desire to share confidences with strangers. She walked the 3 miles to town, purchased what was needed, and endured the stares and whispers of the other shoppers. The woman behind the counter, Morrison's wife, presumably, tried to engage her in conversation, fishing for information about her background and her arrangement with Jessie Calder. "Must be lonely out there." "Mrs.," Morrison said with false sympathy. "Just the two of you." "Course, Jessie's been alone since poor Mary passed." "Such a tragedy. That fire." Eliza murmured something non-committal and escaped as quickly as she could, but the woman's words echoed in her mind during the long walk back. A fire. His wife had died in a fire. She thought of the gaps on the walls where pictures had been removed, the upstairs rooms she was forbidden to enter. What memories was he hiding up there? That evening, as she served supper, she studied him covertly. He wasn't a handsome man in the conventional sense, but there was something compelling about him, a coiled tension, like a wild animal that might bolt at any moment. He caught her looking and frowned. "Something wrong with the food?" "No, sir." She turned away. Busying herself at the stove, she heard his chair scrape back, his footsteps heading for the door. Then he paused. "You do good work," he said gruffly, not looking at her. "The place, it's better." Before she could respond, he was gone. She heard the harmonica again that night, the same melancholy tune floating across the darkness. This time, she found herself humming along, though she couldn't say why the melody seemed familiar. The days stretched into a week, then 2, She learned Jesse's routines, his preferences. He liked his coffee strong and black, his beef cooked through, his shirts pressed just so. He was a hard man but fair, never raising his voice or making improper advances. Sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't read, but he always looked away quickly. The prairie itself was another challenge. The wind never stopped blowing, driving dust through every crack and crevice. The sun was merciless during the day, but the nights could be surprisingly cold, and always there was the sense of isolation, miles of grassland stretching in every direction, broken only by the occasional rider passing through or the distant howl of coyotes. One evening, a storm rolled in from the north, the sky turning an ominous green-black. Jesse came in earlier than usual, his face grim. "Could be a bad one," he said, securing the shutters. "You'd best stay inside tonight." The wind picked up as darkness fell, howling around the house like a living thing. Rain lashed against the windows, and lightning split the sky. Eliza sat by the stove, mending one of Jesse's shirts by lamplight, trying to ignore the violence of the storm. Then she heard it, a crash from the barn. Jesse was on his feet instantly, reaching for his coat. "The horses," he said, and was out the door before she could speak. She waited, watching from the window, but the rain made it impossible to see. Minutes passed. The wind grew stronger, and she thought she heard another crash. Without thinking, she grabbed a lantern and headed for the door. The wind nearly knocked her off her feet. Rain soaked through her dress in seconds, and the lantern was useless in the tempest. She fought her way toward the barn, calling Jesse's name, though the wind tore the words away. She found him trying to calm a panicked mare, a beam having fallen and narrowly missed the animal. Together, they managed to move the horses to a safer part of the barn, working without words, understanding each other through gesture and necessity. When the worst danger was past, they stood there, soaked and breathless. In the dim light filtering through the barn slats, she could see Jesse looking at her with something like wonder. "You didn't have to come," he said. "Yes, I did." They made their way back to the house, the storm still raging but no longer seeming quite so threatening. Inside, Jesse built up the fire while Eliza put coffee on to heat. They sat by the stove, not speaking, letting the warmth seep back into their bones. "My wife," Jesse said suddenly, staring into the flames. "She was afraid of storms, used to hide under the bed like a child." His voice was rough with memory. "I always told her there was nothing to fear." Eliza said nothing, sensing this was the first crack in the wall he'd built around himself. "But it wasn't a storm that took her," he continued. "It was fire. I wasn't here. I was in town, drinking with the boys. And by the time I got back—" He stopped, his jaw clenched tight. "I'm sorry," Eliza said softly. He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing her for the first time. "Why are you here? A woman like you could find work anywhere. Why come to the edge of nowhere?" She considered her answer carefully. "Sometimes nowhere is the only place left to go." He nodded slowly, understanding passing between them. Two souls marked by loss, taking refuge in this desolate place. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside, for the first time since she'd arrived. The silence felt almost companionable. After the storm, something shifted between them. Jesse still ate his meals in silence, still disappeared for hours tending to his ranch. But occasionally Eliza would catch him almost smiling at something, the way she hummed while kneading bread, or how she'd coaxed the barn cats closer with scraps from dinner. These moments were fleeting, gone before she could be certain she'd seen them at all. She began to learn the rhythms of the ranch, the personalities of the horses, the best spots to find wild herbs for cooking. The work was hard, harder than anything she'd known before, but there was something clean about it, honest. At night, she fell into bed exhausted but strangely satisfied. One morning, while dusting the parlor, her cloth caught on something protruding from behind a shelf. Investigating, she found a small wooden frame that had fallen behind the furniture. The photograph inside showed a woman with light hair and a gentle smile. wearing a high-necked dress with delicate lace. This had to be Mary. Eliza studied the face, looking for clues about the woman who had once filled this house with life. She was pretty in a quiet way, with kind eyes and an expression that suggested she was trying not to laugh at something the photographer had said. Carefully, Eliza cleaned the glass and set the frame back on the shelf where it belonged. She was still arranging it when Jesse walked in. His face went rigid when he saw what she was holding. "I found it behind the shelf," she said quickly. "I thought—" "Leave it." His voice was sharp as winter ice. She set the photograph down and stepped back. Jesse stood there staring at it, his hands clenched at his sides. Then, without a word, he took the frame and walked out. She heard his footsteps on the stairs, the first time since her arrival that he'd gone up to the forbidden second floor. That evening, he didn't come in for supper. She kept the food warm as long as she could, finally covering his plate and leaving it on the stove. Through the kitchen window, she could see a light in the barn. The harmonica's melody drifted across the yard, sadder than ever. She was cleaning up when he finally appeared, looking haggard. He saw the covered plate and something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or gratitude. "I shouldn't have spoken harsh," he said, the words seeming to cost him effort. "You loved her," Eliza replied simply. "There's no shame in grieving." He sat down heavily, running a hand through his dark hair. 3 years, you'd think, but some days it's like it happened yesterday." She poured him coffee, strong and black the way he liked it. "Tell me about her." For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, staring into his cup, he began to speak. "Mary was light. That's the only way I can describe her. She could make me laugh when nothing else could. Loved to sing while she worked. Knew every hymn in the book and plenty that weren't, and she had a way with growing things. That patch out back where nothing grows now? She had flowers there. Roses, even, though everyone said roses couldn't survive out here." His voice roughened. "She wanted children. We tried, but, well, the good Lord had other plans. She never complained, but I'd catch her sometimes with this look on her face, watching the church families with their little ones." Eliza's hand stilled on the dish she was drying, memory stirring like dust in wind, but Jesse wasn't finished. The night of the fire, there'd been trouble in town. Jed Morrison had too much whiskey, started making accusations about his lost cattle. "I stayed to make sure things didn't get out of hand." His knuckles were white around the coffee cup. "By the time I saw the smoke, it was too late. The whole house was ablaze. They said she'd been trapped upstairs. Her sewing room—" The cup cracked in his grip, coffee spilling across the table. Eliza quickly mopped it up while Jesse stared at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. "I'm sorry," she said again, knowing how inadequate the words were. "The sheriff said it was an accident. Knocked over lamp, maybe, but Mary was careful about such things. Always was." He looked up at her then, his gray eyes holding depths of pain. "Sometimes I wonder." He didn't finish, but she understood. The wondering could be worse than knowing. That night, she couldn't sleep. Mary's face from the photograph floated before her closed eyes, familiar in a way that made her chest tight. She'd dreamed of fire so many times, the heat, the smoke, voices calling through the flames. But whose voices? Whose faces glimpsed through the inferno? She rose and went to the kitchen, lighting a lamp with hands that trembled slightly. From her small trunk, she pulled out the only possession that truly mattered, a leather journal, its pages filled with fragments. Songs half remembered, scattered words that might be names, sketches of places she couldn't quite place. Her life before the fire that had claimed her adoptive family was like looking through smoke-stained glass, shapes and shadows. Nothing clear. One page held the words to a lullaby, written in her careful hand. "Oh, Shenandoah, I long to hear you, away, you rolling river." She didn't know why she knew it, only that sometimes the melody came to her in quiet moments, bringing with it a feeling of safety she couldn't explain. The next day brought a trip to town for supplies. Jesse surprised her by hitching up the wagon himself. "I'll drive you," he said brusquely. "Need to see the blacksmith anyway." The ride was mostly silent, but it was a comfortable quiet. Jesse handled the team with easy competence, occasionally pointing out landmarks, the creek that flooded every spring, the stand of cottonwoods where eagles nested, the spot where lightning had struck and left the ground somehow barren. In town, she felt the weight of watching eyes more keenly with Jesse beside her. At Morrison's store, Jed Morrison himself appeared from the back room. He was a big man running to fat, with small eyes that lingered too long on Eliza. Well, Jesse called her with a woman on his arm. Wonders never cease. She works for me, Jesse said flatly. That's all. Sure. Morrison's smile was unpleasant. Just like Mary used to work at the church with them orphans. Real charitable. Your women. Jesse went very still. Eliza, sensing danger, quickly gathered her purchases. We'll be going, she said brightly. But Morrison wasn't done. Funny how you always end up with the pretty ones. Called her. Makes a man wonder what you're hiding out there. Jesse took a step forward, but Eliza caught his arm. The blacksmith will be waiting, she said quietly. For a moment she thought he'd shake her off, but then he turned on his heel and stalked out. She followed, heart racing. Back in the wagon, Jesse's knuckles were white on the reins. You shouldn't have stopped me. Yes, I should have. He wanted you to hit him. Probably has the sheriff in his pocket too. Jesse gave her a sharp look. You know about such things? She realized her mistake too late. I grew up in a rough town. He didn't press, but she felt his curiosity like a physical thing. They finished their errands in tense silence. But as they left town, an old woman hobbled out of the church. Mr. Calder, wait, please. Jesse pulled up reluctantly. The woman, Mrs. Hartwell, the former Reverend's widow, approached Eliza's side of the wagon. You're the new help, she said, studying Eliza with clouded eyes. Yes, there's something about you. You have the look of someone I once knew. She reached up with a gnarled hand to touch Eliza's face. We had a girl at the orphanage, years ago. Sweet child. Mary doted on her, taught her songs. She trailed off, confusion crossing her features. But that was before the fire at Reverend White's place. So many lost. Eliza's blood turned to ice. Jesse was staring at her now, his expression unreadable. We need to go, he said quietly. Mrs. Hartwell stepped back, still mumbling to herself. As they drove away, Eliza could feel Jesse's questions building like storm clouds, but he held them until they were well clear of town. Were you at the White Orphanage? The words were careful, controlled. I don't know. Maybe I lost time after my family died. There was a fire, and then fragments. Just fragments. It was mostly truth. Mary volunteered there. Spent every Tuesday with those children until White's house burned. 5 children died. They never found one of the bodies. A girl about 12. His voice was strange. That was 8 years ago. 8 years. Eliza would have been 12 then. The coincidence sat between them like a living thing. You think I'm her? It wasn't a question. I don't know what to think. He pulled up in front of the house but didn't move to get down. What's your earliest clear memory? She closed her eyes, trying to push through the smoke that always clouded her past. A woman singing, a garden with roses, being warm and safe, then fire, always fire, and after. Nothing clear until I was working in a boarding house in Kansas. The people who ran it said I'd shown up half dead, burns on my arms, couldn't even remember my name. They called me Eliza because I looked like their daughter who died. Jesse was quiet for a long moment. Then, Mary sang to those children. Had a rose garden even the orphans helped tend. The weight of possibility pressed down on them both. If she was that missing girl, if Mary had been like a mother to her, what did that make her presence here? Coincidence? Fate? Something else? Do you want me to leave? She asked quietly. No. The word came quick and firm, then softer. No, you stay. That night, neither mentioned what they'd learned, but the air between them had changed, charged with questions neither was ready to ask. Eliza went about her evening tasks while Jessie sat by the fire, the photograph of Mary now sitting openly on the mantel. She was wiping down the table when she found herself humming, that same lullaby that haunted her dreams. She didn't realize Jessie had come to stand in the doorway until she heard his sharp intake of breath. "That song," he said roughly. "Where did you learn it?" "I don't know. I've always known it." She turned to face him, seeing something raw in his expression. "Why?" "Mary used to sing it. Said her grandmother taught it to her, that it went back generations in her family. She was going to—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "She was going to teach it to our children someday." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and pain. Then Jessie turned and walked out into the darkness, leaving Eliza standing alone in the kitchen, the ghost of a song still on her lips. The barn was cooler than the afternoon heat outside, filled with the sweet smell of hay and the comfortable sounds of horses shifting in their stalls. Eliza had come to collect eggs from the hens that roosted in the loft, but the peace of the space made her linger. She found herself running her hand along the smooth wood of a stall door, humming softly as she often did when alone. The melody rose unbidden. "Oh, Shenandoah, I long to hear you," the words forming on her lips without conscious thought. She swayed slightly, lost in the mysterious comfort the song always brought, imagining for a moment that she could remember who had first sung it to her, could see a face through the smoke of memory. The crash of a dropped bucket made her spin around. Jessie stood in the doorway, his face drained of color. The water bucket he'd been carrying spilled across the barn floor. "That song." His voice was barely a whisper. "Sing it again." Something in his expression made her throat tight, but she obeyed, her voice trembling now. "Oh, Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Away, you rolling river." Jessie's legs seemed to give out. He sat down hard on a hay bale, his hands shaking. The exact words, the exact melody. He looked up at her, his gray eyes wild. Mary only sang it one way, different from how most people know it. She learned it from her grandmother, who changed some of the words, said it was their family's version. Eliza felt the world tilt. "I don't understand." No one else knew it that way, just Mary, and apparently, you. They stared at each other across the dim barn, the weight of impossibility pressing down. Jessie rose abruptly, pacing like a caged animal. "You could have heard her sing it, at the orphanage, if you were there. But why would I remember that one song and nothing else clearly?" Eliza pressed her palms against her temples, trying to force the memories to surface. "It doesn't make sense. None of this makes sense." Jessie's voice cracked. "My wife dies in a fire. 3 years later, a woman appears at my door who sings her private song, who might be a child she once cared for, who—" He stopped, running his hands through his hair. "God help me. What am I supposed to think?" "That I'm not her," Eliza said quietly. "I'm not Mary. I could never be—" "I know that." The words exploded from him. "Don't you think I know that? But when you sing, when you move through the house humming like she did, when you—" He cut himself off, turning away. The barn felt too small suddenly. Eliza could hear her own heartbeat, could feel the weight of his pain and confusion mixing with her own. She took a step toward the door, needing air, needing space to think. "Don't!" Jessie's hand caught her arm, gentle but firm. "Please, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. This isn't your fault." She looked up at him, closer than they'd ever been except for that night of the storm. She could see the lines grief had carved around his eyes, could smell the leather and soap scent of him. His hand on her arm was warm, calloused from years of hard work. "I'll leave," she said. "It would be better—" "No." His grip tightened slightly. "That's not— Eliza, I need to know. Are you the girl from the orphanage? The one who disappeared?" She closed her eyes, trying once more to push through the veils of memory. "I think maybe the woman today, Mrs. Hartwell, when she touched my face. Something felt familiar, but it's like trying to see through smoke. Everything before waking up in Kansas is just fragments." "Tell me about the fragments." They sat on hay bales, a careful distance between them, while Eliza tried to put words to the shadows in her mind. Gardens, always gardens in my dreams. A woman's voice, singing, being lifted up to reach something. Apples, maybe? A room full of children, someone reading stories. And then, heat, smoke, screaming, trying to get to a door but the handle burns. And then nothing until Kansas. Jesse listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Mary read to the orphans every Tuesday, and there was an apple tree behind the orphanage. She'd lift the smaller children to pick fruit. His voice was carefully controlled. The fire at White's orphanage started at night. They got most of the children out, but 5 didn't make it. One body was never found, a girl named Sarah. Mary grieved for weeks. Sarah. Eliza tested the name, but it stirred nothing. Was that my name? I don't know. Mary didn't talk much about individual children, just she loved them all. Pain flickered across his features. She couldn't have children of her own. Those orphans were the closest. The afternoon light slanted through the barn doors, casting long shadows. Dust motes danced in the golden beams. And for a moment, Eliza could almost see it. A younger woman lifting a child toward apple branches, both of them laughing. But was it memory or imagination? "This is why you've been distant," she said. "Since I sang that song, you've been wondering." "I've been trying not to wonder." Jesse stood abruptly, pacing again. "Do you know what it's like? You're here, you're not her, but you carry pieces of her, that song, maybe memories of her kindness. And I look at you and see a stranger. But sometimes, God help me, sometimes I see echoes of her influence. The way you tend the kitchen garden in the same spot she did, how you talk to the horses like she used to." "I'm sorry." The words felt inadequate. "I never meant—" "To what? To survive? To come here looking for honest work?" He laughed bitterly. "No. If anyone's to blame, it's me. For letting you stay. For starting to—" He cut himself off again. "Starting to what?" He turned to face her fully then, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "For starting to care about you, not as an echo of Mary, not as some ghost of possibility, but as you, Eliza, the woman who faced down a storm to help with the horses. Who stands up to Jed Morrison's rudeness? Who makes this empty house feel less like a tomb?" The words hung between them, dangerous and honest. Eliza found herself standing, drawn by something she couldn't name. "Jesse, but how can I?" His voice was raw. "How can I let myself feel anything when you might be that little girl Mary loved? When you sing her song, and I don't know if it's coincidence or providence or some cruel joke. When touching you might be betraying her memory in ways I can't even fathom." The pain in his voice broke something in her. Without thinking, she closed the distance between them, reaching up to touch his face. He flinched but didn't pull away. "I'm not a child anymore," she said softly. "Whoever I was, I'm a woman now. And Mary, if she cared for me, if she was kind to a lost child, don't you think she'd want us both to find some peace?" Jesse's eyes closed, and for a moment she thought he might lean into her touch. Then he stepped back, gently removing her hand. "I need time. To think, to—" He gestured helplessly. "Just time." She nodded, understanding even as disappointment hollowed her chest. "Of course." He left then, striding out into the harsh afternoon light. She heard him calling to his horse, the sound of hoofbeats fading toward the horizon. He didn't return for supper, and she ate alone. The empty chair across from her a reproach. That night, she lay awake trying to make sense of it all. If she was Sarah, the lost orphan, what did that mean? The coincidence of finding her way to Jesse's ranch seemed too enormous to credit. Yet, stranger things happened in the wide territories, where people reinvented themselves with new names and histories, where the past could be buried as easily as a body in the prairie earth. But the song troubled her most. Mary's special version. Jesse had said, how could she know it unless— A thought struck her, so startling she sat up in bed. What if the memories weren't from the orphanage? What if they were older still? Could Mary have known her before? Maybe even— No. She pushed the thought away. The fire that killed her adoptive family in Kansas was 5 years ago. The orphanage fire was 8 years past. The timing didn't work for any connection older than her possible time at the orphanage. Yet the song remained, winding through her mind like smoke. Jesse returned late the next morning, hollow-eyed and dusty. He'd slept out on the range, he said curtly, checking on the far pastures. But she could see the weight of sleeplessness on him, the careful way he avoided her eyes. Days passed in careful politeness. They spoke only of necessary things, supplies needed, chores to be done, a fence that required mending. But awareness thrummed between them, electric as lightning before a storm. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her with an expression of such longing it took her breath. Other times, he seemed almost afraid of her. The breaking point came a week later. She was in the barn again, milking the cow, when she heard riders approaching. Several of them, by the sound. Jesse appeared in the doorway, his face grim. "Stay inside," he ordered. "Whatever happens, stay inside." But she recognized one of the voices, Jed Morrison, drunk by the sound of it, and angry. Through a crack in the barn wall, she watched as 4 men confronted Jesse in the yard. "Time to sell. Calder." Morrison was saying, "Railroad's coming through whether you like it or not. You can take my offer or get nothing when they condemn the land. Get off my property." Jesse's voice was steady, but she could see his hand hovering near his gun. "Or what? You'll shoot us all? Like you shot whoever set that fire 3 years back?" Morrison's laugh was ugly. "Oh yeah, we know you went hunting that night. Know you came back bloody. What really happened to your pretty wife?" "Calder," Jesse went very still. "Leave, now! Maybe we should ask your new woman. Awful convenient, her showing up. Maybe she knows something about—" Jesse's fist connected with Morrison's jaw before he could finish. Then everything erupted, 4 against 1. And though Jesse fought with desperate fury, the odds were against him. Eliza didn't remember deciding to act. One moment she was watching in horror. The next, she was running across the yard with the shotgun from the barn. She fired into the air, the sound enormous in the evening quiet. "Next one won't be a warning," she said, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Get off this land." The men froze, staring at the woman with the gun. Jesse was on one knee, blood running from his mouth, but his eyes were fierce with something that might have been pride. Morrison spat blood. "This ain't over. Calder, you neither, woman. We'll be back." They rode off in a cloud of dust and curses. Eliza lowered the gun with shaking hands, then helped Jesse to his feet. "Foolish woman," he muttered, leaning heavily on her. "I told you to stay inside." "Foolish man," she countered, taking on 4 of them alone. In the house, she cleaned his wounds with gentle hands. His lip was split, one eye already swelling shut, and his knuckles were raw. He bore her ministrations in silence, but when she dabbed at a cut on his cheek, he caught her wrist. "Why?" he asked roughly. She met his one good eye steadily. "Because you're a good man. Because this is your home. Because—" She took a breath. "Because I care what happens to you." Something shifted in his expression, slowly, as if fighting himself every inch. He drew her closer. She could feel the heat of him, could see the war between desire and doubt in his face. "Eliza," he said, her name a question and a prayer. "I'm here," she whispered. "Whoever I was, I'm here now." His kiss, when it came, was fierce with pent-up longing, tinged with desperation and grief and hope, all tangled together. For a moment, she let herself melt into it, into him, feeling truly alive for the first time in memory. Then he wrenched himself away, breathing hard. "I can't, not until, I need to know, need to understand." She touched her lips, still feeling the burn of his. "Then we'll find out, together." He looked at her for a long moment, something settling in his battered face. "Together," he agreed quietly. "Outside." Night was falling over the prairie, and somewhere in the distance, coyotes began their evening song. But in the warm circle of lamplight, two damaged souls had taken the first step toward either healing or destruction. Only time would tell which. The morning after Morrison's visit dawned clear and cold. Jesse was already up when Eliza emerged from her room, standing at the stove with his back to her, favoring his left side where Morrison's boots had found their mark. "You should be resting," she said quietly. He didn't turn. "Cattle don't tend themselves. Coffee's ready." She could see the tension in his shoulders, the careful way he moved. The kiss from last night hung between them like morning mist, impossible to ignore, too fragile to address directly. She poured herself coffee and began preparing breakfast, falling into their familiar routine even as everything felt different. They worked in companionable silence until a low moan escaped Jesse as he reached for his hat. Eliza was beside him instantly. "Let me see." "I'm fine. You're not." She guided him to a chair with a gentle insistence. "Shirt off." He gave her a look that might have been amused if not for the pain tightening his features. "Bold words for a proper widow. Nothing proper about me anymore," she replied, already reaching for the buttons. "You should know that by now." His shirt revealed a map of bruises, purple and black across his ribs. She fetched her remedies, salve she'd made from prairie plants, clean bandages, warm water. As she worked, she was acutely aware of him, the warmth of his skin, the way his breathing changed when she touched a tender spot, the scars that told stories of a hard life lived. One scar in particular caught her attention, a long, jagged line across his back that looked like a burn. Without thinking, she traced it lightly with her fingertips. Jesse went rigid. "Don't!" She pulled her hand back. "I'm sorry. How did—" "The night Mary died." His voice was flat. "I tried to get inside. Beam came down, caught me across the back. Someone pulled me out before it could kill me too." The words sat heavy between them. Eliza finished her ministrations in silence, then helped him back into his shirt. As she did, their eyes met and held. "Thank you," he said softly. "For last night, for the gun, for the—" He gestured vaguely, encompassing everything unspoken. "We protect what matters," she said simply. Something flickered in his eyes, warmth, maybe, or recognition. Then he was standing, reaching for his hat again. "That young bull got tangled in wire yesterday. Need to check on him. I'll come with you." He started to protest, then seemed to think better of it. "Suit yourself." They rode out together, Eliza on the gentle mare Jesse had been training. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, grass rippling like a golden sea. Despite everything, Morrison's threats, the confusion about her past, the complicated feelings between them, she felt a moment of pure contentment. This land was harsh but beautiful, demanding but honest. They found the bull where Jesse had left him, the wire cut away but the wound on his leg needing attention. Working together, they managed to clean and treat it, Eliza holding the animal steady while Jesse applied salve. "You're not afraid of much, are you?" Jesse observed, watching her calm the restless bull with a steady hand and quiet voice. "I've learned fear doesn't change what needs doing." She looked up at him. "You taught me that." "When?" "Every day. The way you keep going despite—" She gestured helplessly. "Everything." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Tell me about Kansas, about the family that took you in." It was the first time he'd asked directly about her past. As they rode slowly back toward the ranch, she found herself talking more freely than she had in years, about the Hayworths, who'd run a boarding house and taken pity on a half-dead girl with no memory, about learning to cook for dozens of hungry boarders, to stretch pennies and mend clothes and keep accounts, about the fire that had taken them too, started in the kitchen where grease had been left too close to the flame. "I was at the market," she said quietly. "Came back to flames and smoke and neighbors holding me back, just like—" She paused, frowning. "Just like before. I think someone holding me back while flames—" "While flames what?" She shook her head, frustrated. I don't know. It gets tangled. The first fire and the second. Sometimes I dream I'm trying to get to a door, but someone's carrying me away. A man's voice saying, "Not that way, child. Not that way." Jesse pulled his horse to a stop. The night of the orphanage fire, one of the ranch hands was in town. Tom Bradley. He's dead now. Caught pneumonia 2 winters back, but he helped get children out. Said he had to stop one girl from running back in. Carried her kicking and screaming to safety. Then in the chaos, she disappeared. Eliza's heart was pounding. "You think that was me?" "I think," Jesse started, then stopped. "I think we need to visit Tom's widow. She might remember something." They made the trip the next day. Agnes Bradley lived in a small cabin on the other side of town, taking in washing to make ends meet. She was a bird-like woman with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "I remember that night," she said, pouring tea with hands that trembled slightly with age. "Tom came home with his coat half burned, coughing from the smoke. Said it was the worst thing he'd ever seen. Those poor children." "Did he mention the girl he carried out?" Jesse asked carefully. Agnes nodded. "Little thing with dark hair. He said, fighting like a wildcat to get back inside. Kept crying for someone, not Mama like you'd expect. Something else." She frowned, thinking. "Started with M, I think." Eliza's cup rattled as she set it down. Jesse reached over, his hand covering hers briefly. "Mary?" he asked quietly. "Could have been. Tom said she was hysterical. Had to be held down. Then when folks were trying to sort out which children were accounted for, she was gone. They searched for days. Thought maybe she'd wandered off in shock. Might be lying hurt somewhere. But nothing." "Thank you," Jesse said, standing. "You've been very helpful." Outside, Eliza had to lean against the wagon wheel, legs suddenly unsteady. "I remember fighting. I remember someone holding me back. I remember screaming and screaming, but I don't remember why." "You were 12, Jesse said gently. "A child who'd lost everything. Maybe for the second time. No wonder your mind protected you by forgetting." They drove in silence for a while, each lost in thought. Finally, Eliza spoke. "If I am that girl, Sarah, what does it mean? For us?" Jesse's hands tightened on the reins. "I don't know. Mary loved those children like her own. If you're Sarah." He paused, struggling. "It's like having her blessing and her ghost all at once." That evening, as Eliza prepared supper, she found herself thinking about the complexities of memory and grief. How much of who we are is shaped by what we remember? How much by what we forget? She was so lost in thought that she didn't hear Jesse enter until he spoke. "There's something I need to show you." She followed him upstairs, the first time she'd been invited to the forbidden second floor. He led her to a closed door at the end of the hall, producing a key from his pocket. "This was Mary's sewing room," he said quietly. I locked it after the fire and haven't opened it since." "Jesse, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do." He turned the key with hands that shook slightly. "If we're going to move forward, either together or apart, I need to stop living with ghosts." The room was exactly as Mary had left it 3 years ago. Fabric lay folded on shelves. A half-finished quilt draped over a chair. Thread and needles waiting for hands that would never return. Dust motes danced in the late afternoon light streaming through windows that faced west, toward town, toward where another fire had burned 8 years ago. Jesse stood frozen in the doorway, but Eliza stepped inside, drawn by something she couldn't name. Her fingers trailed over the quilt pattern, flying geese, done in blues and greens. "She was making this for the church auction," Jesse said hoarsely, "to raise money for new books for the orphanage." Something about the quilt tugged at Eliza's memory. She lifted a corner, studying the tiny, perfect stitches. And suddenly she could see hands, not her own, making those same careful stitches. A gentle voice saying, "Like this, Sarah," small and even, like steps across the snow. "Oh," she breathed, sinking into the chair. Jesse was beside her instantly. "What is it?" "I remember. Tears she didn't expect were rolling down her cheeks. Not everything, just her hands, teaching me. She said I had clever fingers, that I'd be a fine seamstress someday. She looked up at him. Wonder and grief mingled on her face. She was kind to me. Jesse's own eyes were wet, slowly, as if moving through deep water. He knelt beside the chair and took her hands in his. She would have been so glad you survived. So glad. They stayed there as the sun set, surrounded by the remnants of a good woman's life, holding on to each other as past and present collided. Finally, Jesse spoke. I loved my wife. Part of me will always love her. But she's gone. And you're here. And Eliza. I can't promise this will be easy. I can't promise I won't sometimes see her shadow when I look at you. But I can promise to try, to see you for who you are, not who you might have been to her. Eliza freed one hand to touch his face, feeling the stubble along his jaw, the warmth of his skin. And I can't promise my memories will ever fully return. I can't promise to be anyone but who I am now. But Jesse, she took a breath. I think I'm falling in love with you. Not with the idea of you, not with this place, but with you, the man who plays harmonica in the dark, who tends his animals with gentle hands, who's trying so hard to be good despite all the pain. He turned his face into her palm, pressing a kiss there. Eliza. Is it wrong? She asked. If I am Sarah, if Mary cared for me, is it wrong for us to... I don't know, he admitted. But I can't help thinking that if anyone would understand two lost souls finding each other, it would be her. She had the biggest heart of anyone I ever knew. They rose together, Jesse carefully locking the door behind them. But something had shifted in the closing of that door, not forgetting, but perhaps the beginning of release. That night, for the first time. Jesse didn't disappear after supper. He sat by the fire while Eliza mended, occasionally reading aloud from a book of poetry Mary had loved. When it grew late and Eliza rose to retire, he caught her hand. Stay, he said quietly. Just sit with me a while longer. So she did, settling back into her chair, their hands linked across the space between them. Outside, the wind sang its eternal song across the prairie. But inside, two wounded hearts began the slow, careful work of healing. The days following their evening in Mary's sewing room passed in a strange new rhythm. Jesse and Eliza moved around each other with careful awareness, like dancers learning new steps. He still left early to tend the cattle, but now he lingered over breakfast, their fingers brushing as she poured his coffee. She still sang while she worked, but now he sometimes stood in doorways, listening openly instead of hiding his presence. Yet despite this new tenderness, a distance remained. Jesse would reach for her, then pull back. Eliza would start to speak, then fall silent. They were caught between what was and what might be, neither quite brave enough to bridge the gap completely. It was the church social that forced things to a head. Eliza had forgotten about it until Mrs. Hartwell appeared at the ranch one morning, driven by her grandson in a rickety wagon. The autumn social is this Saturday, the old woman announced, settling herself at the kitchen table as if she owned it. Everyone will be there, including you two. Jesse, who'd been heading for the door, stopped cold. We don't attend socials. You didn't. Past tense. Mrs. Hartwell fixed him with a steely gaze. 3 years is long enough. Jesse called her. Mary wouldn't want you moldering away out here like some hermit. Don't presume to tell me what Mary would want, Jesse said quietly. But Eliza heard the danger in his tone. Mrs. Hartwell was undeterred. I knew that girl from the time she was in pigtails. She'd box your ears for this self-pity. Her expression softened slightly. Besides, the town needs to see you're not alone anymore, that you have protection. The meaningful look she gave Eliza made the implications clear. Morrison had been spreading talk. After the old woman left, Jesse slumped against the doorframe. I haven't been to a social since Mary died. Eliza finished gently. You don't have to go. I can make excuses. He looked at her then, really looked at her, taking in the worn dress she'd patched and repatched, the careful way she'd pinned her hair. "No, Mrs. Hartwell's right. Damn her. And you deserve better than hiding away out here with my ghosts." Saturday came too quickly. Eliza stood before the small mirror in her room, trying to do something presentable with her appearance. She'd aired out her best dress, still black, but at least the fabric was decent. She was pinning her hair when a knock came at her door. Jesse stood there holding a package wrapped in brown paper. It was Mary's. I thought. He thrust the package at her and fled. Inside was a dress of deep blue wool. Simple but beautifully made. It smelled faintly of lavender despite 3 years in storage. Eliza held it up against herself, tears pricking her eyes. It would fit perfectly. When she emerged wearing it, Jesse was waiting by the wagon. He'd put on his good suit, shaved carefully, even attempted to tame his unruly hair. He stared at her, something raw and vulnerable in his expression. "You look—" He cleared his throat. "Fine. You look fine." The ride to town was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. As they neared the church, they could hear fiddle music and laughter. Jesse's hands tightened on the reins. "We don't have to stay long," Eliza said softly. "No." He squared his shoulders. "We do this right, or not at all." Their entrance caused a predictable stir. Conversation stuttered to a halt. Heads turned. Whispers rose like buzzing insects. Eliza felt Jesse tense beside her. But before he could retreat, Sheriff Watson approached with a friendly smile. "Jesse, good to see you out and about, ma'am." He tipped his hat to Eliza. "Mighty fine evening for a social." Others followed the sheriff's lead, offering cautious greetings. Some were genuinely warm, others merely curious. Eliza noticed how the women studied her dress, recognition flickering in several faces. She held her head high, meeting their gazes steadily. They were managing well enough until Jed Morrison swaggered over, whiskey heavy on his breath despite the early hour. Well, Calder brought his woman to town, dressed her up in dead Mary's clothes, too. Ain't that touching? Jesse went rigid, but Eliza placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Mr. Morrison, how's your jaw? Healing well? I hope." Morrison's face darkened. "You got a smart mouth. Woman, better watch it don't get you in trouble." Like Mary's smart mouth got her in trouble? The words came from somewhere deeper than thought. "Is that what happened? She wouldn't sell to you either, so—" Morrison lunged forward, but Jesse was faster, stepping between them. "Touch her, and you'll answer to me." "And me," Sheriff Watson said mildly, appearing at Jesse's shoulder. "Think you've had enough excitement for one evening. Morrison, why don't you head on home?" Morrison backed away, but his eyes promised retribution. "This ain't over. Calder, not by a long shot." After he left, the social gradually returned to normal, though Eliza could feel the undercurrents of tension. She and Jesse found a quiet corner where they could observe without being too obvious about it. "You shouldn't have baited him," Jesse said quietly. "He practically confessed to—" She stopped as Jesse's hand covered hers. "I know, but he's dangerous. Eliza, more dangerous than you realize. There've been other fires over the years, other accidents, never anything proven, but—" Before she could respond, the fiddle struck up a dancing tune. Couples began forming sets for a reel. Eliza watched wistfully. She'd learned to dance in the Hayworth's boarding house, but it had been years. "Would you—" Jesse stood abruptly, offering his hand. "Would you like to dance?" Surprise nearly made her refuse, but something in his expression, determination mixed with vulnerability, changed her mind. Yes. They joined the other couples, Jesse's hand warm at her waist, hers resting lightly on his shoulder. He was a better dancer than she'd expected, moving with the same quiet competence he brought to everything. "Mary taught me," he said, apparently reading her surprise. "Said a man who couldn't dance was only half a man." She was right about a lot of things, wasn't she? "Yes." His hand tightened on hers. "I think she would have liked seeing us here together. She always said I needed someone to make me laugh again." "Do I? Make you laugh?" A smile tugged at his mouth. You make me want to. That's a start. They danced 3 more sets before Eliza begged for mercy, pleading sore feet. In truth, being so close to Jesse in public, feeling the solid warmth of him, watching rare smiles cross his face, it was overwhelming in ways that had nothing to do with tired feet. They were preparing to leave when Mrs. Hartwell cornered them. You two staying for the pie auction? Mary donated one of her peach pies 3 years running. Jesse's face shuddered. We should go. But fate, or perhaps Mrs. Hartwell's machinations, intervened. The auction began before they could politely escape, and Eliza found herself pressed forward by the crowd, Jesse trapped beside her. The auctioneer was midway through when he held up a pie that made the crowd murmur appreciatively. Now here's something special, folks. Apple pie from our newest resident, Mrs. Hayworth. Smells like heaven itself. Eliza's stomach dropped. I did. Mrs. Hartwell said smugly from behind them. Took the liberty of entering it this morning. Mary's recipe, if I'm not mistaken. Found it in the church donation box with a note. Jesse turned to Eliza, his expression unreadable. She felt heat climb her cheeks. I wanted to contribute something. The church needs funds. And I found the recipe card in the kitchen drawer, and $20, Jesse called out, his voice cutting through her explanation and the auctioneer's patter alike. A gasp went through the crowd. $20 was an outrageous sum for a pie, even for charity. 25. Morrison's voice rang out from across the room. Jesse's jaw tightened. 50. 75. Morrison countered, his words slurred but determined. $100. Jesse said firmly. And if Morrison bids again, I'll make it 200. The silence was deafening. Even the auctioneer seemed stunned. Morrison muttered something ugly, but subsided. Sold, the auctioneer managed. To Jesse Calder for $100. Jesse pulled out his wallet, counting out bills as the crowd buzzed with speculation. He collected the pie with grave dignity, then offered Eliza his arm. Shall we go? They made it to the wagon before Eliza's composure cracked. Jesse, $100, that's worth it. He helped her up onto the seat. Morrison's not getting his hands on anything of yours. Besides, a ghost of a smile crossed his face. Mary's pies never sold for less than top dollar. Seemed fitting. The ride home was quiet, but it was a different quality of silence than before. The moon was rising, casting silver light across the prairie grass. Eliza found herself stealing glances at Jesse's profile, thinking about the way he'd defended her, danced with her, paid a fortune for her pie. Thank you, she said softly. For tonight, for the dress, for everything. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I've been a fool. What? Keeping you at arm's length. Afraid of betraying Mary's memory. But tonight, seeing you in her dress, watching you handle Morrison, dancing with you. He pulled the wagon to a stop, turning to face her fully. She would have wanted this, would have wanted me to be happy, would have wanted you to be happy, especially if you're Sarah. Eliza's heart was racing. Jesse, I'm tired of being afraid, he continued. Tired of letting the past dictate the future. You asked once if it was wrong. Us caring for each other. I don't think it is. I think maybe it's the most right thing in this whole mixed-up situation. He reached out, cupping her face in one work-roughened hand. Tell me you feel it too. Tell me I'm not alone in this. You're not alone? She whispered. You haven't been since the day I arrived. This time when he kissed her, there was no desperation, no pulling back. It was soft and sure and full of promise. When they finally parted, both breathing unsteadily, Jesse rested his forehead against hers. Come home with me, he said quietly. Not to your room off the kitchen. Come home with me properly. She understood what he was asking, what he was offering. Not just his bed, but his heart, his future, his trust. The weight of it should have frightened her. Instead, she felt something inside her finally settle into place. Yes, she said simply. They drove the rest of the way in charged silence. At the ranch, Jesse helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist. Inside, he lit a lamp, the warm light casting dancing shadows. "Eliza," he began, but she silenced him with a finger to his lips. "No more words tonight. We've said enough." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Then, with infinite tenderness, he led her not to the stairs, but to the kitchen table where he carefully cut 2 slices of the $100 pie. They ate in companionable silence, the simple domesticity of the moment more intimate than any grand gesture. When they'd finished, Jesse stood, offering his hand once more. This time, Eliza followed him upstairs without hesitation, ready at last to stop running from the possibility of happiness. Outside, the wind sang its eternal song, but inside the house that had known too much sorrow, 2 hearts began to write a new chapter. One built not on forgetting the past, but on choosing to embrace the future, whatever it might bring. The barn was quiet, except for the soft rustling of hay and the occasional nicker from the horses. Rain drummed steadily on the roof. Having started just after sunset and showing no signs of stopping, Eliza had come to check on a mare that was due to foal soon, but the animal seemed calm, dozing in her stall. She should have returned to the house immediately. Instead, she found herself lingering, running her hands along the smooth wood of the stalls, breathing in the familiar scents of hay and leather and animals. This had become her refuge when her thoughts grew too tangled, this place where she'd first sung the song that changed everything. 3 weeks had passed since the church social, since Jesse had led her upstairs with such tenderness. 3 weeks of a new kind of life, one where she woke each morning in his arms, where the walls between them had finally crumbled. They'd found a rhythm together, a careful dance of 2 people learning to trust in happiness again. Thunder rolled across the prairie, and the mare shifted nervously. Eliza hummed soothingly, the melody rising without conscious thought. The same song. Always the same song. "Oh, Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Don't stop." She spun around. Jesse stood in the doorway, water dripping from his hat, his expression unreadable in the dim light of the lantern. "How long have you been there?" "Long enough." He stepped inside, shaking the rain from his coat. "I woke and you were gone. Got worried." "The mare is fine." He moved closer, and she could see his face now, the intensity in his gray eyes. "Sing it again." "Jesse, please." There was something in his voice, a rawness that made her comply. She sang softly, the words flowing like water, watching as emotions played across his face. Pain, longing, something that might have been peace. When she finished, he was standing very close enough that she could feel the heat of him despite his rain-soaked clothes. "Every time you sing that song," he said roughly, "I feel her, not like a ghost, not like something haunting me. Like a blessing, like she's telling me it's all right to love you." Eliza's breath caught. Love. He'd said the word so easily, as if it wasn't still a miracle after all they'd been through. "Do you?" she asked softly. "Love me?" Instead of answering with words, he pulled her against him, his mouth finding hers with desperate hunger. The kiss was different from their careful bedroom tenderness. This was raw need, primitive and demanding. She responded in kind, her hands tangling in his wet hair, pressing closer despite the dampness of his clothes. He backed her against the wall of the barn, his hands roaming her body with newfound urgency. She gasped as he found the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder, his lips and teeth sending sparks through her entire being. "Jesse," she breathed, and he groaned against her skin. "Say my name again," he commanded, his voice rough with desire. "Let me hear you say it." "Jesse," she repeated, then gasped as his hands found the buttons of her dress. "Jesse, the horses." "Don't care about the horses." But he paused, pulling back to look at her. "Unless—" "Do you want me to stop?" In answer, she pulled him back down for another kiss, pouring all her own hunger into it. 3 weeks of careful, gentle lovemaking had been wonderful, but this wild need, was something else entirely. This was two people claiming each other without reservation, without the shadow of the past tempering their passion. They made a bed of sorts in the fresh hay, Jesse spreading his coat for her to lie on. The storm outside seemed to echo their urgency, thunder punctuating their gasps and murmurs. When Jesse rose over her, his face illuminated by lightning flashes, Eliza thought she'd never seen anything more beautiful than this man who'd learned to love again. Their coming together was fierce and tender by turns, passionate yet somehow sacred. Jesse whispered her name like a prayer, and she responded with words of her own. Not just his name, but fragments of feeling, promises without shape, vows without words. Afterward, they lay entwined in the hay, listening to the rain and their own gradually slowing heartbeats. Jesse traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder, his touch gentle now where it had been demanding moments before. "I do, you know," he said quietly. "Love you. I should have said it weeks ago. Should have said it the night of the social. Should have—" She silenced him with a kiss. "You're saying it now. That's what matters." He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. "Sometimes I wake up terrified this is all a dream, that I'll open my eyes and you'll be gone, just another ghost. I'm not going anywhere," she promised, then hesitated. "Jesse, there's something I need to tell you." She felt him tense slightly. "What is it? How to say it?" She'd suspected for a week now, had become certain only this morning. "I'm with child." The silence stretched so long she began to worry. Then Jesse sat up abruptly, staring down at her in the dim light. Are you certain?" She nodded, watching his face anxiously. A dozen emotions seemed to flicker across his features: shock, fear, wonder, and finally, blazing joy. "A baby," he breathed. "Our baby. Are you happy?" For answer, he kissed her deeply, then pulled back to rest his hand wonderingly on her still flat stomach. "Happy doesn't begin to describe it. Eliza, do you know what this means? A child, a future, a reason to fight for this place instead of just existing on it." Tears pricked her eyes at the naked hope in his voice. "You're not afraid?" "Terrified," he admitted, "but the good kind of terrified, the kind that means something matters." He paused, studying her face. "Are you happy about it?" "Yes." The word came without hesitation. "I didn't expect, after losing everything, I never thought I'd have a family again. But yes, I'm happy. And scared. What if—" "No what ifs," he said firmly. "We'll face whatever comes together." A thought seemed to strike him. "We need to marry. Properly. I mean, not just living as man and wife, but legal. In the church, where everyone can see." Jesse called her. "Is that a proposal?" Even in the dim light, she could see his cheeks redden. "Not much of one, I suppose. You deserve better. Flowers and pretty words and—" "Yes," she interrupted. "Yes? Yes, I'll marry you. Here in the barn or in the church or in the middle of Main Street, I don't care where, as long as it's you." He kissed her again, softer this time, full of promise. When they finally parted, the storm had begun to ease, though rain still pattered on the roof. "We should go back," Jesse said reluctantly. "You'll catch cold out here." They dressed slowly, stealing kisses and touches, neither wanting to break the spell of the moment. As they prepared to dash through the rain to the house, Jesse caught her hand. "Eliza, about the baby. I want you to know, it doesn't matter to me." "What doesn't matter?" "Who you were before. Sarah or someone else, orphan or not. You're Eliza Calder now, or will be soon. The woman I love, the mother of my child, that's all that matters." The simple acceptance in his words broke something loose in her chest. "Oh, Jesse." "Come on," he said gruffly, clearly uncomfortable with the emotion of the moment. "Let's get you inside and warm." They ran through the rain hand in hand, laughing like children. In the kitchen, Jesse built up the fire while Eliza made hot tea. They sat close together, her head on his shoulder, planning quietly. A Christmas wedding. They decided. Small. Just close friends and the few townsfolk who'd been kind. New curtains for the windows. a coat of paint for the nursery, the small room next to theirs that had stood empty. Mary's sewing room, Jessie said suddenly. We could make it the nursery. It has the best light, and I think she'd like that. New life in that space. Eliza squeezed his hand, understanding what the offer cost him. That would be perfect. They talked until dawn crept across the prairie, painting the wet grass gold and rose. When Jessie finally rose to tend the animals, he paused at the door. I love you, he said, as if testing the words. I love our baby. I love this life we're building. I love you too, she replied. All of you, even the parts that still hurt. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his weathered face. Especially those parts, he agreed. They're what brought us together. After he left, Eliza stood at the window, watching him cross to the barn. The storm had washed the world clean, leaving everything fresh and gleaming in the early light. She placed a hand on her stomach, imagining the life growing there. A child born of sorrow transformed to joy, of two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other. The song rose in her throat again, but this time she let it come, her voice carrying across the prairie morning. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to see you, away, you rolling river. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to see you, away, I'm bound away. Cross the wide Missouri. From the barn, she heard Jessie's voice join hers, rough and untrained but perfect in its imperfection. They sang together, separated by distance but united in hope, while the sun climbed higher over the vast grasslands that had become their home. Inside her, the baby fluttered, impossibly early, probably just imagination, but she chose to believe it was real, a new life quickening, drawn perhaps by the song that had brought its parents together, the melody that connected past and future in an unbroken chain of love and loss and love again. She sang louder, not caring who might hear, claiming this moment and this place and this man and this child as hers. The past might always be shadowed with smoke and sorrow, but the future, oh, the future blazed bright as prairie sun after rain. The winter came early that year, November bringing snow that blanketed the prairie in pristine white. Eliza stood at the kitchen window, one hand resting on her growing belly, watching Jessie repair a fence post near the barn, even bundled in his heavy coat. She could see the tension in his movements. Morrison's threats had escalated in recent weeks, dead cattle found on the borders of their property, fences cut in the night, and once a bullet hole through the barn wall, too close to where Jessie worked to be accidental. You're worrying again. She turned to find Mrs. Hartwell in the doorway, having let herself in as had become her habit. The old woman had appointed herself Eliza's unofficial guardian as her pregnancy progressed, arriving twice a week with advice, gossip, and genuine affection. He won't talk about selling, Eliza said quietly. Says this is our land, our home, but I'm scared. Mrs. Hartwell, what if... Hush now. The older woman guided her to a chair, then busied herself making tea. Jessie Calder's no fool. He's taking precautions. Sheriff Watson's been out twice this week, and those hands from the Double Bar Ranch have been keeping an eye on things. It's not enough. Morrison has money, influence, and Jessie has something more powerful, a reason to fight. Mrs. Hartwell's eyes were knowing. A man protecting his pregnant wife is dangerous in ways Morrison can't understand. Trust in that. But trust was hard when she woke in the night to find Jessie's side of the bed empty, knowing he was standing guard somewhere in the cold darkness. Their newfound happiness felt fragile as spun glass, beautiful but so easily shattered. The wedding had been a quiet affair, just as they'd planned. Eliza had worn Mary's blue dress again, let out to accommodate her changing figure. Jessie had stood before the altar in his one good suit, his eyes never leaving her face as they spoke their vows, when the Reverend pronounced them man and wife. Jessie's kiss had been tender and claiming all at once, a promise sealed before God and the small gathering of witnesses. But even that joy had been shadowed by Morrison's presence outside the church, watching with calculating eyes as they emerged into the winter sunlight. Now, a month later, the threat felt more pressing than ever. Jesse had hired 2 hands to help with the winter work, but Eliza knew they were really guards, their rifles always within reach. "I should check on him," she said, rising despite Mrs. Hartwell's protests. "He hasn't eaten since dawn." She bundled up carefully. Jessie fussed if she went out inadequately dressed, and made her way across the frozen yard with a basket of food and hot coffee. Jesse looked up from his work, and despite everything, his face softened when he saw her. "You shouldn't be out in this cold," he said, but he was already reaching for her, pulling her carefully against him. "You shouldn't skip meals," she countered, pressing the basket into his hands. "The baby and I insist you eat." He smiled at that, the way he always did when she mentioned the baby. "How is our little one today?" "Active. I think he's going to be a dancer like his father." "Her," Jessie corrected automatically. They'd been having this playful argument for weeks. "She's going to be beautiful like her mother." They stood close together, sharing warmth and this moment of peace. Then Jesse stiffened, his hand moving to his gun. "Get to the house," he said quietly. "Now." She heard it then, horses approaching, several of them. But before she could move, the riders crested the hill. Her heart sank as she recognized Morrison at the lead, flanked by 6 men she didn't know, hard-faced men with guns worn low and easy. "Afternoon. Calder," Morrison called out, reining in just outside rifle range. "Thought I'd make you one last offer, neighborly-like. Get off my land." Jesse's voice was steady, but Eliza could feel the coiled tension in him. "Now, that's what I want to discuss. See, I've got papers here from the railroad. Official-like, they're willing to pay good money for a right-of-way through here, more than fair market value." Morrison's smile was all teeth. "Of course, they're also willing to invoke eminent domain if necessary. Take the land anyway, and you get nothing." "That's not how eminent domain works," Jesse said flatly. "They still have to pay." "Sure, eventually, after court battles you can't afford, after your pregnant wife spends months in town waiting for hearings, after your cattle die from neglect and your ranch falls apart." Morrison leaned forward in his saddle. "Or you could take my offer now. Today. Cash money. Enough to start over somewhere else." "No." The simple word hung in the cold air. Morrison's face darkened. "You're a fool. Calder, what happened to your first wife was a tragedy. Would be a shame if history repeated itself." Jesse moved so fast Eliza barely saw it, his rifle up and aimed before Morrison's men could react. "You threaten my wife again, and I'll kill you where you sit. Badge or no badge, witnesses or not." "Jesse," Eliza said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "Don't. He's not worth it." For a moment, the tableau held, Jesse with his rifle raised, Morrison's men with hands hovering near their guns, Eliza standing between them all with her hand protectively over her belly. Then one of Jesse's hired hands emerged from the barn, rifle casual in his hands but ready. The other appeared from behind the house. The odds had shifted, and Morrison knew it. "This isn't over," he said finally, wheeling his horse around. "Railroad's coming whether you like it or not. Smart men profit from progress. Dead men just get plowed under." They watched the riders disappear over the hill. Only then did Jesse lower his rifle, and Eliza saw how his hands shook. "Inside," he said roughly. "Both of us. Now." In the kitchen, he paced like a caged wolf while she made coffee with trembling hands. "Mrs. Hartwell had wisely made herself scarce. We could leave," Eliza said quietly. "There's no shame in it. We could go somewhere else. Start fresh." "No." Jesse stopped pacing, turning to face her. "This is our home, where we fell in love, where our child was conceived, where Mary—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "I won't let him drive us out. Even if staying means—" She couldn't finish the sentence. He crossed to her, framing her face with the gentle hands. "I failed to protect Mary. I won't fail you. Trust me." "Eliza, please." She searched his eyes, seeing determination mixed with fear, love tangled with old grief. "I do trust you, but I'm scared." "So am I," he admitted. "But we're stronger together than apart, and we're not alone." Sheriff Watson's a good man. The other ranchers don't like Morrison any more than we do. We'll fight this smart, not just hard." That night, they made love with desperate tenderness. Each touch a promise, each kiss a vow. Afterward, Jesse held her close, his hand splayed over her belly where their child grew. "Feel that?" Eliza murmured. "She's kicking." Jesse corrected, wonder in his voice as he felt the movement. Strong like his mother. They lay in comfortable argument about names and nursery colors, determinedly not talking about Morrison or threats or the fear that haunted them both. But later, when Jesse thought she was asleep, she heard him whisper prayers into the darkness, for strength, for wisdom, for the chance to see his child born. The attack came 3 nights later. Eliza woke to the smell of smoke and Jesse shaking her roughly. "Get dressed, fast, we need to go." Through the window, she could see orange light flickering. The barn was ablaze. Jesse was already dressed, rifle in hand, face grim. "Stay behind me," he ordered, leading her toward the stairs. "We'll go out the back." The window exploded in a shower of glass. Jesse shoved her down, covering her body with his as more shots peppered the walls. From outside came shouts, the panicked screaming of horses, the crackle of hungry flames. "They're trying to flush us out," Jesse said grimly. "Force us into the open." He helped her crawl to the back door, then paused. "When I say run, you head for the root cellar. Don't stop, don't look back. Not without you. Eliza, please, the baby." She saw the anguish in his eyes, the terrible echo of another fire, another woman he'd failed to save. "Together," she said firmly. "We go together or not at all." Before he could argue, she heard new sounds, more horses, more shouts, but different. Then Sheriff Watson's voice, loud and commanding. "Drop your weapons, all of you, in the name of the law." The gunfire intensified, but now it seemed directed away from the house. Jesse peered cautiously out the window. "It's Watson and a posse. They must have been watching." He broke off as recognition dawned. "Stay here." But she followed him onto the porch, unable to remain hidden. The scene that greeted them was chaos. Men fighting to control the barn fire, others exchanging shots with fleeing riders, Sheriff Watson directing it all with calm authority. And there, illuminated by the flames, Morrison on the ground with 2 men holding him down. It was over in minutes. 3 of Morrison's men were captured. 2 fled. 1 lay still in the yard. The barn was lost, but they'd saved most of the horses, and Morrison himself was in custody, caught in the act of arson and attempted murder. "Been watching him for weeks," Sheriff Watson explained later, "accepting coffee in their smoke-damaged kitchen. Ever since you came to me with your suspicions. Jesse, tonight he finally gave us what we needed." "You used us as bait," Eliza said, too exhausted for anger. "No, ma'am, I hope to prevent this. But men like Morrison, sometimes they have to hang themselves before the law can touch them." The sheriff's expression was apologetic but unrepentant. "He'll swing for this. That's justice for your Mary, too. Jesse, we found evidence connecting him to that fire as well." Jesse's hand found Eliza's, squeezing tight. "It's done then?" "It's done. His claims on your land die with him, legally speaking, of course. Railroad might still come sniffing around, but without Morrison pushing it, I doubt they'll bother with this route." After the sheriff left, Jesse and Eliza stood on their porch, watching the sunrise paint the sky above the smoldering ruins of their barn. It should have felt like defeat, but somehow it didn't. "We'll rebuild," Jesse said quietly. "Better than before. We will." Eliza agreed, leaning into his solid warmth. "Together." She began to hum then, their song carrying across the damaged landscape. Jesse joined in, his voice harmonizing with hers. It was a song of rivers and longing, of journeys and homecomings. But most of all, it was a song of survival, of love proved through fire and emerged stronger. Inside her, their child moved, as if dancing to the melody that had brought its parents together. And Eliza knew, with certainty born of trials overcome, that this child would know only love, only safety. only the vast possibilities of a future unencumbered by the shadows of the past. The barn could be rebuilt, the house could be repaired, and their love, tested by fire twice now, had proved itself stronger than any force that might try to destroy it. They were home. Spring came slowly to the prairie that year, melting away the snow to reveal the scars of winter, the blackened remains of the barn, the bullet holes still pocking the house walls. But it also revealed new growth, green shoots pushing through the earth, wildflowers beginning to bloom, and the framework of a new barn rising against the sky. Jesse worked from dawn to dusk alongside the neighbors who'd come to help rebuild. The same men who'd once whispered about the stranger widow were now here with hammers and goodwill, their wives bringing food and companionship for Eliza, whose belly had grown round and full with impending motherhood. "Won't be long now," Mrs. Hartwell observed, watching Eliza ease herself into a rocking chair on the porch. "Maybe another week or two." Eliza rubbed her back, feeling the familiar ache that had been growing stronger. "I hope so. I'm ready to meet this little one." First babies take their time, Agnes Bradley added, setting down a basket of fresh bread. "My Tom, God rest him, he kept me waiting near 3 weeks past when the midwife said." The women continued their gentle chatter, but Eliza found herself watching Jesse. He was up on the barn roof with several other men, fitting new shingles. The sun caught his hair, showing threads of silver she hadn't noticed before. The trials of winter had aged him, but they'd also brought a peace to his features she'd never seen in those early days. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, his face breaking into a smile that still made her heart flutter. He'd been about to wave when his expression suddenly changed to alarm. "Eliza!" She tried to stand, to ask what was wrong, but a crushing pain seized her middle. The coffee cup she'd been holding shattered on the porch boards as she doubled over. "Oh my," Mrs. Hartwell said calmly. "It seems the baby has other plans." What followed was a blur of activity. Jesse half fell, half climbed down from the roof, racing to her side. The women took charge with practiced efficiency, ushering her inside while sending the men for the midwife and more supplies. "Jesse!" Eliza gasped between contractions. "Don't leave me. Never," he promised, gripping her hand as they helped her to their bedroom. "I'm right here." The midwife arrived within the hour, a competent woman named Martha Stone, who delivered half the babies in the county. She took one look at Eliza and nodded approvingly. "Progressing nicely. First babies can be stubborn, but this one seems eager to meet the world." Hours passed in a haze of pain and effort. Jesse never left her side, letting her squeeze his hand until his knuckles went white, wiping her forehead with cool cloths, murmuring encouragement when she thought she couldn't continue. "Sing for me," she begged during a brief respite between contractions. "Our song." His voice was rough with emotion, but he sang, "Oh Shenandoah, I long to hear you." The familiar melody seemed to give her strength, connecting her to all the women who'd labored before her, all the love that had brought her to this moment. As the sun began to set, painting the room in shades of gold and rose, Martha announced it was time. Jesse held Eliza against him, supporting her as she pushed with everything she had left. "That's it," Martha encouraged. "One more, dear, one more," and a cry split the air, not Eliza's but a new voice, high and indignant and perfect. "It's a girl," Martha announced, quickly cleaning the baby and wrapping her in soft flannel. "A beautiful, healthy girl." She placed the infant in Eliza's arms, and the world seemed to stop. The baby was tiny, red-faced, with a cap of dark hair like her father's. Her eyes, when they fluttered open, were gray as storm clouds. "Hello, little one," Eliza whispered, tears streaming down her face. "We've been waiting for you." Jesse made a sound somewhere between a laugh and a sob, reaching out with one trembling finger to touch his daughter's cheek. The baby turned toward his touch, making small, mewing sounds. "She's perfect," he breathed. "God in heaven, she's perfect." "What will you call her?" Martha asked, bustling about with practiced efficiency. Eliza looked up at Jesse, seeing the answer in his eyes before he spoke it. "Sarah," he said softly. "Sarah," Mary called her. Sarah for the child Eliza might have been, for the past reclaimed and transformed, Mary for the woman whose love had made this moment possible, whose kindness echoed through time. It was perfect. As Martha and the other women tended to the practicalities, Jesse climbed carefully onto the bed beside his wife and daughter. Sarah had latched onto Eliza's finger with surprising strength, her gray eyes studying them with what seemed like ancient wisdom. "She has your nose," Jesse observed, wonder in every word. "Your stubborn chin," Eliza countered, then winced. "Oh, and apparently your timing, born right in the middle of barn raising. The barn can wait." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Nothing matters but this. You, her, our family." They lay together in the gathering twilight, marveling at the miracle of new life. Outside, they could hear voices as neighbors celebrated the birth, but inside their room, the world had shrunk to just the three of them. Later, when Eliza had been bathed and made comfortable, when Sarah had nursed and fallen asleep in her mother's arms, Jesse finally spoke what had been in his heart all day. "I thought I'd lost the ability to be truly happy," he said quietly. "After Mary died, I went through the motions of living but never felt alive. Then you came, bringing music back into my life. And now," he gazed at his sleeping daughter, "now I understand that sometimes we have to break completely before we can be rebuilt stronger. Like the barn." Eliza murmured drowsily. "Like the barn," he agreed. "Like us." In the days that followed, their home became a place of pilgrimage as neighbors came to admire the baby and bring gifts. Sarah proved to be an easy infant, content to sleep in her basket while her parents worked to restore their home and land. The new barn rose tall and strong, built by a community that had accepted them fully. At its raising, Jesse stood before the gathered crowd with Sarah in his arms and made a speech that brought tears to many eyes. "3 years ago, I thought my life was over," he said simply. "I was a ghost, haunting my own existence. Then Eliza came, and though I fought it, she brought me back to life. We've faced trials, fire and threats and fear, but we've also found love, created new life, and discovered that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice. Each of you chose to help us rebuild, and we're grateful beyond words." That night, as they sat on their porch with Sarah sleeping between them, Eliza asked, "Do you think Mary would be happy with how things turned out?" Jesse was quiet for a long moment, considering. "I think," he said finally, "that she would be overjoyed. She always said love multiplies, it doesn't divide. Loving you doesn't diminish what I felt for her, it honors it. And this little one," he touched Sarah's cheek gently, "she's proof that beauty can come from ashes, that endings can become beginnings." Eliza began to hum their song, and Jesse joined in, their voices blending in the warm spring air. Sarah stirred in her sleep, making small, contented sounds, as if she recognized the melody that had brought her parents together. In the weeks that followed, life settled into new rhythms. Jesse would come in from working the ranch to find Eliza in the rocking chair Mary had once used, nursing Sarah while humming. Sometimes he'd catch her teaching their daughter the old songs, the ones that connected past to present in an unbroken chain. One evening, as summer touched the prairie with golden light, Mrs. Hartwell came to visit. She held Sarah with practiced ease, studying the baby's face with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. "She has the look of you both," she pronounced finally. "But more than that, she has the look of someone who'll make her own path, strong stock. This one, like her mother," Jesse said, wrapping his arms around Eliza from behind. "Like both her parents." "Mrs. Hartwell corrected. Takes strength to survive what you both have, takes more strength to thrive afterward." As she prepared to leave, the old woman paused at the door. "I have something for you. Been waiting for the right time." She pulled out a small leather journal, worn with age. "Found this when we were cleaning out the church archives. It was Mary's, her notes from working with the orphans." With trembling hands, Eliza opened the journal. There, in Mary's neat handwriting, were notes about each child, and there, near the middle, Sarah, age approximately 5. Found after fire destroyed her family's homestead. Bright child. Loves to sing. Teaching her Shenandoah. She has perfect pitch. Must remember to work with her on reading tomorrow. Such a dear girl. If God doesn't bless Jessie and me with children, perhaps... The entry stopped there, unfinished. Eliza's vision blurred with tears. She loved you, Mrs. Hartwell said gently. Seems fitting that you'd find your way back to each other, even if not in the way anyone expected. After she left, Eliza and Jessie sat together, reading through Mary's journal by lamplight while Sarah slept peacefully in her cradle. The entries painted a picture of a woman full of love and hope, someone who'd found purpose in caring for lost children. She would have been a wonderful mother, Eliza said softly. She was, Jessie replied. To you, to all those children, and in a way, she still is. Through you, through what you learned from her, through what you're teaching Sarah. They closed the journal carefully, placing it on the shelf next to their wedding photograph. The past and present existed side by side now, no longer at war, but in harmony. That night, as they prepared for bed, Sarah woke crying. Eliza lifted her, beginning to sing the lullaby that had started it all. Jessie joined them, his arms encircling both wife and daughter. His voice joining hers. Oh, Shenandoah, I long to hear you. Away, you rolling river. Outside, the prairie wind sang its own eternal song. But inside the house that had known such sorrow and such joy, a family sang together. The circle was complete, not ended, but transformed. Love flowing like a river from past to present to future, carrying them all home. Thank you for listening to our story. We'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale. Are you listening during your commute, relaxing at home, or perhaps on a long drive across your own frontier? Please subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your stories and connections make our community richer, just like Jessie and Eliza's love story was enriched by the community around them.